You're listening to the Not Just Numbers podcast, a conversation with mathematicians on their work and their lives to get to know them and discuss common biases and misconceptions.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the podcast It's Not Just Numbers. Today we're talking about doing research with Hildeberto, Jardón, Kojakhmetov.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And Pinar, Kilicer.
Thank you.
And of course my co-host Marcello, Seri.
Hi everybody.
Thank you for coming to this podcast. First of all, could you tell us who you are and what you do in your daily life? Would you be able to start, Hildeberto?
Okay, yes. Right, my name is Hildeberto. I'm assistant professor here in the group of dynamical systems. My research is about the study of differential equations, particularly some of those having multiple timescales. That means processes that evolve at different timescales. And recently I've been putting more attention into networks, neuroscience and neuromorphic computing.
And as somebody who doesn't know a lot about these topics, could you explain it to me in a more simple manner?
Yes. So in our brain, there are some cells called neurons that form the main structure of our brain. And it is a very important question in science to understand how our brain functions, but also to mimic how it does it, because it is one of the most efficient organs that we have. And so people want to understand it from many fields of science, and some mathematicians also want to do that, but also to exploit it to do new computations. And this is the field of neuroscience and neuromorphic computing. And so in my research, we want to approach those type of questions from the point of view of dynamical systems. That is, we see a neuron as a dynamical system itself, and we see ensembles of neurons that could be like a toy model of the brain. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but let's put it like that, as a network of dynamical systems. And we try to understand the qualitative properties of these dynamical systems.
I see. That sounds very interesting, by the way. And I can imagine that many people will be interested in this also for very small devices. So thank you. And you, Pinar?
Hi, my name is Pinar. I work at the Bernoulli Institute. I'm an assistant prof in the algebra group. My research is somewhere between number theory and geometry. I try to understand number theoretical objects like number fields and their class groups and other properties to understand some geometric objects better, and the other way around. So I study, for example, elliptic curves to construct some fields with certain properties. And this doesn't sound as cool as yours, but this also has some applications, for example, to cryptography and so on.
But you are mainly interested in the applications?
No, not really. But of course, when I was teaching like security coding, I was supervising a lot of crypto bachelor theses, but in that level, I don't think higher than that I can do right now. No, I don't have the right background for the applications.
Let's remind the listeners that crypto here is cryptography and not necessarily crypto coins.
No. That's good. Good point, yes.
Just to tell a little anecdote to our listeners, in fact, this is the second time we are recording this podcast. We did it in December. It was supposed to be the episode for January. And it turns out that our memory card decided to die after the recording, and we could recover about 5 minutes of the 1 hour 20 or so of the recording that time. Thankfully, we scheduled this recording more than 1 month later now, 2 months in fact. So I have forgotten your answer by now.
But it was intentional, right?
Yes,
we did it so that we all forget about the last episode.
I really like your suggestion of let's do it later so we forget. And so I genuinely asking you, how did you get in touch with these topics? Because I don't remember at the moment. So Pinar, how did you get involved with number theory? What drove you into it and what do you like about it?
Right. So I don't remember what I answered last time. So yeah, I guess when I was doing my bachelor, I already understood what I enjoyed the most. I really liked algebra more than analysis or other topics. And then I already decided to work on something which is around algebra. And then when I was doing my master's, I got more interested in number theory. And I guess I just got more interested in these topics because I could do them, maybe.
Like they were more natural to you when you were...
I guess this is what I'm trying to say. Yes. What about you?
For me, getting into dynamical systems was kind of a transition. I'm not a mathematician by training. I'm an engineer. And I thought I would work in something related to engineering. But then due to some teachers and friends during my bachelor's, I got more interested into mathematics. And then I said, okay, why don't I try a little bit more mathematical topic? And then I did a master's in control theory, which is kind of a bridge in between engineering and mathematics. And during my master's, I studied some work, or I pretended to study some work from Henk Bruijn, who is, of course, a professor here and has been in this podcast. And this led me to ask him whether I could do a PhD with him, and he agreed. And so I guess circumstances got me into dynamical systems. Once I arrived to Groningen, we decided a topic, and he suggested to study dynamical systems with multiple timescales, and that's how everything happened. Yeah.
So you came to Groningen for your PhD. What did you study before?
I did a bachelor in mechatronics and then a master's in automatic control. Yes.
But here?
No, in Mexico.
And you, Pinar?
I did my bachelor in mathematics, also master in mathematics.
But here in the Netherlands?
No, in Turkey. So bachelor and master, they were both in Turkey.
And for your PhD, then you moved here?
Yes, I moved to Leiden. I did my PhD in Leiden. I spent some time in Germany for postdoc, and then I came to Groningen.
And Hildeberto, what do you like in particular about your field of study, dynamical systems?
Right. I like a lot that it can be quite pure. Of course, it has all the formalities of mathematics, but also it is very natural to apply it. And also intrinsically, even if people don't realize, when you study real systems and you think of them as processes that change in time, you implicitly are talking about dynamical systems. So I think it is a language that covers a lot of what we see in our daily life. And this is what attracts me quite a lot about it.
And Pinar, about you?
I think what I like the most is the connection between geometry and number theory. Like you study some number theoretical object, which is purely number theoretical, but then it has a meaning on the other side. This is very nice. I mean, it is everywhere, right? In mathematics, the things are connected, even if the subjects are different. And I really enjoy seeing these connections.
Yeah, I can relate with both of you, honestly. So both the fact that what you do can be applied, and then somehow it gives you a tangible escape from your abstract daily life, and makes you connect topics that in principle are completely there up in the air to something that actually is there in front of you or above you or around you, depends on what you're doing, or inside you, thinking about the brain. And yet, at the same time, you have all these parts of mathematics that are described separately, but they are one, right? You think about manifolds and vectors, and then you think about vector spaces, which are abstract objects, and then you find that if you study, what was it, locally ringed spaces, I think, then you get the algebraic way of describing vectors, and then you think about derivatives of curves, and you're back in dynamical systems, and yet it's all the same thing, they're just vectors. So it's just fascinating if you think about it, right? You're studying this, especially as a student, separately, and then suddenly you see, oh, but they were actually the same thing. And we never realized it before, especially as a student. I don't know, what's your experience there, Anna?
Yes, I certainly, I mean, in the bachelor, you learn all the basics. And then when you're in the master, suddenly you have courses where all the things you learned are integrated within one thing. There's a few courses approximation of Diophantine equations. Oh man, yeah, it's a hard topic. So you need all the machinery you've got. You need number theory, you need analysis, you need everything, Galois theory. Those are the nicest courses because you have an overview of all the mathematics you've learned so far, and you need to have all of it in order to solve those problems. Have you experienced this personally too, Pinar?
Right. It is, of course. I mean, yeah, what you learn in bachelor, right? This is the background you are building up on that. So it is just a very tiny bit of what you are supposed to know to do research. So, of course, they are all connected. You have to use all of these machinery in higher research. That's very relatable for all of us.
And was it always apparent that you would follow this path into number theory, or were there other things like analysis that would have been a second option that you could have done?
No, it was always, I think, algebra for me. I mean, I didn't really have much interest in that side, but I don't want to be a bad example for the students. You should not make your choices already in the bachelor level or master. So you really have to keep your interests broad. As you said, right? So in Diophantine approximations, you'll use analysis. So you have to use and you have to learn all of that machinery when you are doing your bachelor, master, so that you can build upon that.
I was curious, Hildeberto, you said that you started from engineering and then slowly there you found your way to mathematics as something that was interesting you and attracting you. But Pinar, you said you went straight to maths, bachelor, master, and then PhD and the rest. So I'm curious, what is it that drove you to do mathematics?
Right. In the first place, I think during high school, I guess, right? I got interested in mathematics and I was good at doing mathematics. Obviously, the mathematics in high school is very different than the mathematics in the university or the other way around, actually, because you learn very little at high school. So in Turkey, there is this entrance exam to the university. You take the exam and then you get some grade, score, something, and then you make your choices. My choice was to do mathematics. Some people are like, I chose this. It didn't work, so I'm doing this. No, actually, so for me, mathematics, but then I also wanted to be a medical doctor. But then it was in between, they're really like on one side mathematics, the other side is completely different than that. But I'm very happy where I am. So I'm happy it didn't work out in the end. But anyway, so let me come back to the topic. So I liked it. So that's why I chose it. Otherwise, I could also become something else like everyone else here. But then when I started the university, I was quite shocked because like everything I learned in high school was just really very primitive. And then I learned higher mathematics there and I enjoyed there. And then deciding doing masters, I think it came quite natural because I wanted to pursue in academia. I already knew that when I was doing my bachelor's. And then I found a master position and then applied for PhD and so on. It just worked out. There was also, of course, luck because many people would like to maybe have the same path, but it doesn't always work because, I remember last time we discussed this, right? We were really saying that luck is involved in this path a lot, but not obviously only luck, right?
This makes me curious because you say that from your experience of mathematics in high school, you actually decided to pursue mathematics in university, even though it's completely different.
I didn't know by that time that they were completely different, but I just enjoyed doing mathematics. Yes.
In high school even?
Yes, in high school, yes.
Oh, I've heard some different stories, so I was wondering about that. But even then it was nice, and maybe in university it was even nicer?
I struggled. I struggled a lot in the first year. I struggled a lot, and I guess after the second year, I adjusted myself better, and it got easier in time. But in the beginning, I struggled a lot, even though I liked doing mathematics and so on. But there were other factors. But that's why I can really understand struggling first-year students, because I also had the same problem when I started. So
I recognize this, whether I should be doing something else. I've chosen something else. Of course, living on your own for the first time in your life. This is all going into first years, maybe. First year's experience.
Not only first years, actually. If you do research, I don't know if it happened to you, but this was always to me like, am I doing the right thing? Up until I have this permanent position, I was always like, self-doubting myself. It is, I think, experience for many people. So I was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I the right person to do this? It comes to you every time you have to apply for a new position because, you finish your master and then you self-evaluate yourself, and then you finish your PhD, you self-evaluate again, and then postdoc, another postdoc, and then until you have the permanent position, you keep going.
Were you able to actually shut that down now? Because if I think at myself, that question keeps coming nevertheless.
That's true, but now I don't have time to think about that question. Yes, I have so many things on my plate, so I can't really think about that not right now. But you're right. Yes, it's probably gonna come back.
Can I go back a bit to Hildeberto, because I am curious about your experience. First of all, in the transition from mechatronics to mathematics, you did it smartly by taking intermediate steps with systems and control and then moving slowly to mathematics. But still, right, I remember friends that were moving from engineering to math, and it was kind of a similar shock to the shock from high school to university, because the mathematics you do when you apply it in physics, engineering, chemistry, or computer science, it's quite still different from the larger, broader mathematics perspective that you need to take as a mathematician, and the much more rigorous approach that you have to take there.
That's true. I think the main difference is the rigor. For example, in my bachelor, we had mathematics courses, of course, for engineering, but taught by mathematicians. And this helped a little bit. But naturally, you cannot cover courses as a mathematician would do. But still, there was a little bit of it. And then the biggest shock changing or going into the master was that already the rigor was much higher. And I don't know if this is something that you get used to it or you eventually learn, but this is where I think the most difficulties appeared. And even more in doing your PhD, because then you are expected already to be a trained mathematician, regardless of what your background is. You just get to it and work a lot, talk to a lot of people. And I had also the fortune of having a supportive supervisor with whom I could talk a lot, and this helps. But indeed, it's not I don't want to say it's a difficult process, but it's a shocking one. Yes, indeed.
Did this come natural to you, this rigorousness?
Not really. I mean, I don't think I could have done it by myself, definitely. I had to read a lot and fail a lot, of course, because one thing is that you believe you're rigorous, but if nobody has told you or given you feedback about it, then you are not certain about it. I think you learn doing, but also by talking to more experienced people. And in my case, was a combination of both, I think. I'm not sure if I've ever gonna be as rigorous as one needs to be, but you get better by practicing and talking to the right people, of course, yeah. Collaborations also help a lot, for example. So I've had also the fortune of collaborating with pure mathematicians where I'm constantly learning. So,
in this process of adopting this, well, maybe new skill, going back to what Pinar said, did you ever feel doubts, or was it not too much of an issue
always,
for you?
Yes. Constant.
It's a universal thing, it seems.
I think it comes with the job as well. I mean, doing research, you have to question everything, even yourself, right? And I think it's a healthy part of research. One must not overdo it, of course. But yeah, you always have not necessarily self-doubts on your capabilities, but whether what you're doing is good enough or it is worth, I don't know, some interest of your colleagues or whatever at any level, or funding. Now that funding is extremely important. So yeah, self-doubt is always present, I think. And I agree with what Pinar and Marcello have said. I think it's just different in every stage of your path. When you're in bachelor, master, maybe this comes as questions, I don't know, every few years because you need to apply for the next job. And now that you have a more permanent position, it doesn't disappear, right? Because you still need to apply for grants or get new ideas or set up new collaborations.
Convince people why you're the one.
Yes, this always comes back. Yeah.
And also, I think willingly or unwillingly, you are comparing yourself with the people you see around yourself. And in most cases, you only see everything that is going well. You never see the struggles or the number of unsuccessful grants applications or the talk that went bad or whatever, right? So you're always comparing yourself, eventually implicitly, not necessarily because you want, against the successes of everybody else. And then you start wondering, why am I having so many failures? And then I think it's much more recent that people starting opening up about this, and then you realize that we all have the same struggle. Mm-hmm. At least for me, I don't know what's your experience. For me, during the PhD, this was still quite hidden. It's something that came a bit afterward to see that these struggles actually were much more common.
You mean comparing yourself with other people?
So the fact that we are much more similar than we expect, and it's not true that everybody else is a genius and I'm not. It's just we are all experts of our own niche eventually. And so, yes, we know a lot about one thing, but we cannot know a lot about everything. So it's normal that everybody else will know a lot about their own thing and we don't know about it.
Yeah, totally. So when I was doing my PhD, someone told me like, even the best mathematicians, they compare themselves with better ones. You know, like if you look at the field medalists, for example, they are comparing themselves with, I don't know, maybe this will be exaggeration, but with Gauss or, you know. So you can always find someone who is doing better than you do. So after I heard this, I thought about that and then I stopped comparing myself with other people, because you can always find those people. And I guess it is mostly like if you enjoy what you're doing and if you're good enough with what you're doing, this is my kind of philosophy. As long as I enjoy, I will keep doing it. So whenever I stop enjoying, maybe I look for other things, but I don't think so.
And yeah, together with that, I think progress in science requires not only effort only of the brightest of brightest. I mean, we can all do worth contributions. Of course, you always wonder whether they are worthy or not, but at the end, I believe they are, as long as you're serious on what you're doing. So I think science is a collective effort, and we all benefit from small contributions or big.
And getting back to field medalists, I was quite surprised by a recent post of Terence Tao on Mastodon. He was saying that he's surprised when people are surprised to learn that he has a lot of rejections on his papers. And at some point, he was giving example of papers that were rejected, including some in which they made a measured step on some big conjecture, but not prove the conjecture, send it to a good journal that rejects it because it's not the proof of the conjecture. So they send it somewhere else. In the meantime, they find a proof of the conjecture. So they send the proof of the conjecture, which is published, and the other earlier paper is rejected because the conjecture is known. So what's the point of proving partial results on the conjecture? So this is a successful story in the sense that they actually proved the big conjecture, but he was saying that there are so many examples in which papers are just jumping from a journal to the other until you find either the right referees or the right target journal for that specific results. And in the meantime, you get rejected, sometimes with useful comments, sometimes with less useful comments. And he is a field medalist and is extremely famous. So it happens to really everybody.
Going to something outside mathematics for this moment. What do you like to do in your free time?
Yes, in my free time, I raise a child. Yes, I will keep my previous answer. Yes, that is what it is. So I have no free time right now, but if I had free time, I think I would like to spend more time with my friends, more time traveling, watching things, reading things. But currently, no. What about you, Hildeberto? You also have a child, right?
Yeah, so I'm in the same boat right now. So indeed, I also think there is very little free time. So my kid is now 9 months. And it also happens that the amount of time you would use to work before having a kid and after having a kid is reduced quite a lot, because, okay, we get paid for working 40 hours, but I think in our field you work much more. But now, at least I really feel that the hours I can dedicate to actual work are reduced. And also, since you need to concentrate, the hours that you are fully awake are also reduced. So yeah, it's true. It's not it's just not natural. It's just normal. Everybody says it gets better, so I'm looking forward to it. Before that, in my free time, I would enjoy a lot doing sports, especially squash, and learning other things that are not related to mathematics. My partner and I like to cook a lot, so that was something common. It will have to wait a little bit.
Any specific preference for the cooking?
We are both Mexican, so we try. I mean, it's a bit difficult, but it helps to not miss too much Mexican food. And we've gotten better at it, so that's good. And then also Thai food. My partner likes a lot Thai food, so we also try. We try several Asian cuisines. We try a bit of Japanese, a little bit of Chinese, but Chinese is too broad, right? So maybe the most commercial Chinese, I don't know. Yes, so yeah, we try a bit, but our preference still Mexican food, yes.
My mouth is watering. God,
Yes, mine too. Although I would be very afraid of the spiciness level, probably. Yeah.
Right.
I'd be very curious, actually.
Oh, sounds amazing.
But wait. Is there any ingredient you're missing here, talking from an expat to another?
There are a few. I mean, you can get sufficiently good things via ordering through internet. The problem is the freshness of things. Yeah, so that's the main issue. Well, then it comes from preferences, right? So I used to eat a lot of cacti leaves, and you can do a lot of food with this, and this you cannot get fresh, for example.
Uh-huh. Can you grow it at home, or it's too slow, or too cold?
Yeah, I think it's too cold. Yeah.
Even indoor?
Even indoor, yes. But there are some other, I think, fresh stuff. There are a lot of flowers with which you can also cook. These are the things that you don't get. But there is nothing, to be honest, that you cannot find a substitute as long as you're aware that it's going to be a substitute. Then it's fine. Yeah, you get around it.
What about you, Marcello? I mean, you're Italian and this is Europe. What are you missing?
There is a surprising amount of good vegetables and sausages and hams and cheese that is close enough to what we have in Italy, so I don't miss that many things. Although when I go back, I notice that some vegetables have a completely different taste in the south of Europe. But there are some which are really hard to ship because they would deteriorate in the travel. And those I miss. Like stracchino is a soft cheese that I like a lot and goes very well if you make piadina with mortadella. That's a pity. Radicchio is something you find here, but somehow you find it only in Christmas, or you have to look really, really carefully at the market. That's another thing that I miss. And if I can find it, usually I buy it just to do something random with it, as long as I eat it once every now and then. There are a lot of vegetables that we usually pick wild in Italy that you cannot find here. And also in Germany, when we were in south of Germany, which is even closer, they were just very hard to get. But most of the things we can find or we can get delivered, and I guess it's much easier than getting them from Mexico.
Well, as a Dutch, I can't say I have a lot of experience or difficulty with finding ingredients. I mean, our food culture isn't that interesting to me. But for you, Pinar, do you have certain dishes? No?
No, I'm from Turkey, and I think the reason is that there's a big Turkish community here, also in Germany. So there are a lot of Turkish markets. So I think I can find most of the stuff that I'm looking for. I can't really name anything that I'm missing. No, I'm also not really very picky. So I'm not really missing any Turkish food. So again, my partner also fortunately likes to cook. Not always. Sometimes he's like, oh, I had enough, so let's order something. But then, yeah. So I'm just eating whatever he cooks. And he's from Montenegro, and the cuisines are quite similar, even though he's now vegan. So yeah, I'm not missing anything from Turkish cuisine, no. And also Turkish cuisine is actually quite easy to adapt to vegan.
But okay, let's go back to
research.
Exactly.
Yes.
I guess the first question there is, what does it mean to do research, and what does it look like? Hildeberto, would you like to start?
Sure. How does it look like doing research? To me, is having some interesting questions, open problems that you would like to understand better and hopefully explain, and then go in the adventure of doing that. It also means working together, for example, with my students, which I try to do, or with colleagues. I don't do any research on myself at all. Not because I don't want to, but because I enjoy it more doing it with other people. And also because now you need to think about efficiency. And at least I am much more efficient when I talk to other people. it also means that you sometimes fail, that your ideas sometimes don't work, or you overlooked something, but you learn from it. So it's a constant process of learning a little bit, taking a few steps back and repeating again in order to understand better what you started with. In the process, new questions arise, and sometimes you forget about the initial question. That also may happen. But yeah, it's a constantly evolving process, I would say. Yeah.
Have you done more researching really on your own in the past, whereas now you're more working together?
So during PhD, the research is essentially on your own. Of course, you rely on your supervisor, but the core of the research is essentially on your own. During your postdoc, you need to show that you are a mature researcher, so your research is mostly on your own, even though you start collaborating a little bit more and you can talk more like colleagues with your postdoc supervisor, things like this, but still research, I would say, is 90% still on your own. Once you get to, for example, in my case, to assistant professor, it almost stopped like full because you have a lot more things to do suddenly. And it also, as I said, I think that I'll learn more from other people and you are more efficient as well with your research. I also enjoy doing it with my students because I like that they learn how to become researchers. Is something you have to learn, I think, by doing it. But also because they have very different points of view and they make you wonder that or ask yourself whether what you're thinking is in the right path or not. So at some moment I did, but now, no, not at all. Yeah.
I see. And you, Pinar, how do you conduct your research? Is it mostly collaborating or?
Yes, it is very similar to what Hildeberto explained. I'm also doing research with collaborators. I guess during your PhD, as you said, you're on your own, relying on your supervisor. And nowadays, I'm also collaborating with other people.
Has this changed over the years? As in, at some point, you started working together more?
Yes,
with other people?
Yes, that's true. So what you do is actually you start with the problem, right? So my research evolved this way. Maybe I should explain that first. I had my PhD problem, right? I studied that, and then from that you come up with new problems, new open problems, and then you study those problems, and then you deviate to other directions, or you talk to other people doing research similar to what you are doing, and then you get new ideas, and then you collaborate with them, and so on. So this is how it goes, the research. So you just don't Google something, oh, is this known? Oh, let me study. No, at least for me, no. So I always work on topics that are really close to what I'm doing, what my background is suitable for. So I don't start something from scratch, right? It's probably the same thing for most of us. And this is how it evolves. And these days, I'm mostly collaborating with people. I have very little time for research, unfortunately. But when I have time, I'm doing some joint works with some people from abroad, even not even here. So that means research for me right now is having Zoom meetings.
I'd like to go back to something you said. You said, okay, stick close to what I am doing, but then you collaborate with other people. And my impression is that step by step, you might get quite far from what you were doing. And now your range of expertise has moved in a quite unexpected way to other fields and other aspects. Perhaps in the same area of mathematics, sometimes not, but still. Would you say that what you're doing now is so close to what you were doing in your PhD?
I can't say very far. But it's not like exactly the same problem, but relatable problems. Yes. So what I was doing in my PhD, I was studying some actually number theoretical objects I explained at the beginning of the podcast. So recently I'm more working on geometric side of the problem, let's say. So I used to work on the number theoretical side of the problem more. Now I moved to geometry a bit more. So maybe maybe it is what you said, yes. But I can't still say that it is quite far.
Well, there must be some connection, right? Something that is anyway connected to your expertise, but still it can change in ways that you might not have expected before.
That's true. And also it's fun that it is happening, because otherwise it gets very boring doing very similar things over and over. So it's good to have some sort of different perspective on the similar problems, maybe. Yeah.
And Hildeberto, I would like to ping back this question to you, but with a twist, right? You're working with neuroscientists, with control theorists, with mathematicians, people that have quite different background, also in the type of work they do and in the way they work. So I'm curious to know how this affects your research and the way you work with people.
Right, that's a very interesting point. The first thing you realize is that you talk different languages. When you want to do some collaboration, even though the words themselves are pronounced exactly the same, they mean completely different things. And this is a barrier that is still, I think, the main obstacle for multidisciplinary collaborations. Once you break it, then many interesting things may come for both sides, of course. I've had a very good experience, for example, with biochemists, which our collaboration has been quite good. I've learned a lot from them, and hopefully they've learned a lot from us. And people in the life sciences are realizing that mathematics are extremely important and very, very useful. And I find that, people are more willing for these collaborations. But it is indeed complicated, because from one side, nobody has the time to invest in breaking these obstacles. And also the way science now, I think, works is more, there is a higher weight into production of publications. And so when this is the priority, it also conflicts with this process of trying to come together, because it takes a lot of time, and you may need to do little projects to see if you can really come up with something together, etc. That will not necessarily lead immediately to publications. So the right conditions needs to be there, and these are a bit difficult. But I think people are trying from very different fields, and for me, it has been fruitful experience so far. Not everything has been successful, but overall, you also learn from the non-successful attempts, let's say.
I like this unsuccessful because I had a question before. You said sometimes your idea fail, and my impression is that oftentimes your ideas fails, and this is part of the game, right? No, you don't know where you are going. You have an idea of what you would like to achieve. But if the path was already laid down for you, then it would have been already achieved. So it means that there is still quite some work to figure out the right, or not even the right, one way to get there. And then somebody perhaps later will make it better or smarter or faster or whatever. And so is that sometimes the rare event, or is that sometimes the common event?
Yeah, that's true. I think the thing is when you set up to solve something or you have a goal, while you're pursuing it, even before you fail, you also find other goals, right? And so even if the starting question, you have to call it a failure, but I think you can always salvage something. But you get up you set up new goals. And so indeed, as you say, since the path is not laid down for you, you have this liberty of finding new goals in the process, right? And so I think, yes, as you said, oftentimes you find yourself failing in your original ideas, perhaps, because of course you don't know. But that doesn't mean the process is a failure, right?
Yeah, I fully agree. But this really means that you have to embrace this uncertainty, right? That you have to start saying what you said. It's not a failure with a negative connotation. It's just that was not the right idea, or maybe that was not the right path to get there, but this can lead us somewhere else. And if not, you can steer and see where the thing that didn't work.
It could also be that it was not the right time. You probably still don't have the sufficient tools to solve that, right? You need to deviate a bit and then you come back. Yeah. Yes.
Is that similar for you, Pinar?
Definitely. I think it is less stressful if you are doing research for yourself. And if this is a PhD project, for example, and if this happens to a PhD student, I think it is more stressful. So yeah, I have a PhD student right now, and I feel that stress for him. So for my own research, if I can't solve something, if I have to deviate, if I have to come back, I just do it. But PhD students, they have limited time. So yeah, you have to be quite careful, right? So how do you choose a PhD project, right? That's a very difficult, I think.
It is difficult, I agree. I don't know if I have the good strategy. Usually the way I do is if I have an idea that I'm confident could work for a small step, if there is some long-term, much interesting question that could start from this step, then I know there is a stepping stone that I'm fairly confident we can make work. And with experience, I think you can gauge confidence for the first stepping stone at least. And then from there is part of the job, I think. So my impression is that we have talked about shocks, right? You go from high school to bachelor. The shock is that you are on your own, you're away from your family, you have to deal with the time to learn to study on your own without much more guidance, but you still have the advantage that all the topics are kind of silos. And then you go to the master, and then you have the shock that all of them come together. Then you go to the PhD. So what is the shock there? And I think the shock at the PhD is that you have to embrace the unknown. So you have to get used to the fact that there is a question which might not even be precise yet, and you have to find your way to get there, one way or another, or to transform it in the right question. And so I think it's good to start from something that is sensible and achievable, also because at some point it gives you the pleasure of having achieved it. Even if doing it myself would have taken maybe a month, and for a PhD student it would take 1.5 years because they have to study all the background and everything, but it's realistic and achievable and the small win. But then the next step is for them to do the parachute jump and see where it goes, right? And then try to find their path. So I'm there trying to guide them, trying to reason together, but at some point it needs to go from my idea to their research. And so this is the process I try to follow. Then it depends on the people. Some people are much more stressed out. Perhaps I'm more on top of them at the beginning until they are less stressed out. Some people are already happy to just go and try things out. And then my role is much more about keeping them focused on one problem.
Right, that's true. So, for example, with my PhD student, we discuss one topic, and then the next meeting, we sometimes forget what we were discussing. He comes up with completely new ideas, and then he deviates himself from the topic I told him. Okay, look into this. And then next week he comes back with something else. And then I have to bring him back to the question that I asked him at the first place, for example. So, but this is a job for us, but there's also their sides, right? So it is not an easy task, maybe. We should maybe point that out, right? Being a PhD student is difficult, but...
Being a researcher, it's also in research that you have to be extremely flexible with what ideas work. Maybe they don't work any longer. You have to switch, go back, whatever it is. Which leads to my next question. Where do you think you learned the skill of being this flexible in your ideas and thinking of new ones? Or was this all natural to you?
Or do I even have the skill?
Well,
yeah, I think I have it, but I'm not sure if it came natural. Nothing. I feel like you also ask, Hildeberto, like if precision came natural to him. It was a very actually accurate question. I just want to come back to that very briefly. It wasn't natural to me. It is still not natural to me, especially in my life. I'm not a precise person, but I try to be precise when I do research. There are two separate things. In my daily life, I'm never precise. I'm always like 60% precise. And so if I come back to the question about...
Where you learned these skills?
Where I learned these skills, I think during my PhD, not before. Yes, most of them you develop while you're doing your PhD. You learn a lot of things when you're, not only research, how to do research, you really learn a lot when you're doing PhD, and that's actually fun.
You have to get used to the whole becoming a researcher thing, right? So you have to get used to communicating what you're doing. You have to get used to being much more on your own. You can study together with other people, but your research project is your research project. You are becoming the expert there. So even if you have office mates, you can talk about your respective research projects. Sometimes you collaborate, it happens, but you're mostly on your own, on your project where you are the expert. So you have to get used to that as well. You have to get used to the fact that now it's your job sometimes to teach a bit, but mostly to do research and learn how to do research. And so learn how to cope with the fact that there are lots of uncertainties even in what you're doing, not just in finding jobs later. This is something that usually you are so distracted by everything else that you, last 6 months, you say, oh God, I need to start applying for jobs.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And so the skills you learn then, is it both from experience or a supervisor or one more than the other?
I guess they come together, right? Because of course your supervisor is there to probably let you know that you should be kind of flexible and you should not see everything as a failure. I think or at least it happened to me, that we also have not a right idea of what doing research means until you do it. I guess this applies to everything, but okay. So people come into the PhD and probably have never been exposed of what true research is. And some points have already been touched here, but especially I think is one of them is doing things on your own. Yeah, you have to learn to do them. It's not that you are on your own during your PhD. Okay, it depends, but you have to be open to do things on your own and not expect that people will solve problems for you. And sometimes this is the most difficult thing because we are not used to this. Yeah, we are used to every time in school you are given the problems, yeah, and somebody tells, you're doing right. In research, it doesn't work like this, right? And I think this is where you learn these skills of being flexible. And during the process you get some help and you see other people doing it. So it's.
But it's much less than maybe during a master or bachelor thesis.
Definitely, I would say yes.
So you kind of have to have this
responsibility. But also you have the time, right? Because in a bachelor project, you don't have the time to, probably you can do a little bit of research, but it's not a full research project because generally 3 months, you barely get to know what the question is in reality, right? Master, you have a little bit of time, but I think where you can really get the time to learn all these skills is during your PhD.
And one other thing that because you're on your own, you have to find your way around is, first of all, is tracking your progress, realizing that you're not wasting time, you're doing something, because since you don't have a result in your hand immediately, days are passing that you're studying, you're trying things out, but you don't have anything in your hand. So it feels like you've done nothing or you have not done enough. So you need to realize that there is a lot of work going on which will lead eventually to something, but cannot give you the immediate satisfaction. And so somehow it's filtered out by your mind. So at some point you have to find your own way of realizing that you are working. And the other thing is managing time, which is hard even now, but this is where you start realizing that you have to figure out how to manage your time. And I'm curious to know what's your experience with both of things.
Is there a very practical way in which you track your progress personally?
Oh, personally, I'm terrible. I am just, I've tried so many things, I just cannot stick with them. So my tracking progress is, after a certain time, do I see that I achieved what I wanted? So I try to give me deadlines so that at least I know I would like to see something by the same amount of time. What I suggest to the students is either to have a bullet point journal or a to-do list where you write down what you have done, or to keep a actually visible record of what you're doing. Like sometimes I have all my computation written down and idea written down in my iPad. So if I look there, I find that there are all these pages of work done. So I can still look at what I've been doing. And now I track the time on the calendar, so I can look in the calendar, but I don't do more than that. But like sometimes as a student, if you have your notebook where you do your work, or if you write it in LaTeX and have a folder with all day by day what you've done, then you have a tangible thing that shows, look how much has gone on. And to some of my students, this had helped. So I had a few students that were really struggling with, I'm not doing enough. And by either tracking what they are doing and what they want to do, or by keeping it in a notebook that is physical, not just pieces of paper, it made a huge difference. Because after 2 weeks, they had finished 2 notebooks and they say, okay, I'm doing lots of stuff in here. It's not just that I'm wasting time and warming up my chair.
This is actually a very good advice for the students that they have to. I say similar things. So when I have a bachelor or master student, I immediately tell them, whenever you understand something, type them in LaTeX. Because then when it comes to writing the thesis, it accumulates. And that's actually another good perspective that they also see what they achieve, right? So maybe I should also add this to my comments to my students. That's very good.
I'm doing this currently for my master's thesis, and it has helped me enormously. Also because at some point, maybe you've understood something, and then after 3 months, you've totally forgotten about it, but you still have a record of what you did before. How about you, Hildeberto?
Right. I also don't think I'm a very good tracker of my progress, but it also comes because now you have so many things to do that if you put some effort and work, you eventually have progress, right? But I can understand that for a young researcher, this is a much more difficult and important question. So it, again, depends on the stage of your career, I guess. I think now the suggestions or the points that have been talked are quite good. Also, it helps a lot to talk with your peers, right, and with your supervisor. I think always relying on your supervisor can be helpful because this is the person that is looking at your research from a bird's eye point of view, right? So we can see whether really there is something in progress or not, I think. And about time management, also a bit difficult, I think, mixing so many things. But I think prioritizing what is more important at the moment or more pressing, like some deadlines or things like this, is of course quite useful and quite important. I think it's also another skill that you just get used to it, and at some moment you also need to learn to, I guess, leave your projects be finished with them, because you can always do better. Huh? You're always, but now I could maybe explore this other direction, and this will do my research or my paper, let's say, stronger. But sometimes you need to be able to say, okay, this is enough. Until here, I will call it good progress, and then let's go further, and things like this.
On the point of letting go of perfection, sometimes you have to let go of the problem. This is something that at least happened to me the first time during my PhD. We were studying something that was coming from the master project question that I had. And we did some progress, but at some point we got stuck. And we got stuck for a long time, and we couldn't understand why we were stuck. And then, okay, you have a limited amount of time with the PhD. So at some point, my supervisor said, look, this is going nowhere, and we don't know how to make it go somewhere. So let's just change problem. And we reused a lot of the skill with this other problem that was in a completely different direction, but it wasn't the end of life. It wasn't really a problem. It's just this happens, and this is part of the game. I think this was one of the most learnable moments in my PhD, seeing that, okay, I've worked a lot on this, and it just doesn't work in the way we want it. So if we want to finish the PhD, we just have to move on. And it's all right to move on.
Did you go back to the same problem again afterwards?
Oh, every now and then, yes. I made actually some progresses here and there. It led, in fact, to a lot of my research after the PhD went to a different direction. But this direction was informed by that problem. So it turned out that if you want the whole details, you should go back to our first episode of the first season. But a common colleague and friend saw a picture in my talk and in a talk of a friend of mine. And he said, you have the same picture, you should talk. So we met in a cafeteria in Paris because for random reason, all three of us were in Paris. And we started talking, and we were working on completely different things. However, my original problem in their setting not just made sense, it could be solved.
Uh-huh.
And the whole research I'm doing in Sub-Riemannian geometry is born from this event, from this person noticing two pictures from two talks, one about a work that has never been published and one about the work of this other friend. And then we realized that from there we could actually move on quite substantially.
This part of doing research is quite fun, actually. You know, you collaborate with other people, you talk to other people, you exchange ideas. I enjoy this part a lot. Yes,
I love it.
It sounds very fun.
It's where new ideas come from, yes, right? It's people working on different things that somehow have this one thing in common. Might be an equation, might be a theorem that sounds similar, might be a question that sounds similar, but it's on a different aspects. And then you sit down and you realize that you could bring in your two expertises together and come up with something new, which then becomes relevant for both, or just a new whole thing. It's wonderful.
It almost sounded like the plot of a scientific movie, you know, when these three ladies come in, and I'm not sure the game theorist, I'm not sure who he was again.
John Nash.
John Nash, thank you. Suddenly he realizes this thing, and then yeah. I mean, it might not have happened this way for you, but it sounds like this ideal setting where you realize, oh, okay.
But I think this shows the power of your networking. Showing what you're doing, even when it's not completely ready, is actually useful. And talking to people, it's actually useful, which is something I find fascinating, because in other fields, you never talk about your ideas until they are published, because there is a high chance of them being stolen. And from this point of view, I really like that in most mathematics, it's the complete opposite. It's all there in the open. It's there even before being published. You put it on the archive when you have a decent draft a few days before submitting. So if somebody has comment, you can still work on these comments, right? It's so rewarding to be able to share it openly and then discuss it together, and sometimes destroying it and sometimes transforming it.
Is it then less competitive in nature, or do you still feel this competitiveness within research?
You're asking the wrong person from this point of view. There is a big of competitiveness in the sense that grants, there are not that many. They are very big, especially for what a mathematician needs, and there is not that much money. So it's super competitive. Positions are very few. Sometimes some periods, they are just frozen because of economic troubles or whatever. So there is a lot of competitiveness there. Same with postdocs, same with PhD. It's always a competition in that sense, but then it's up to you to decide if this is your run against the other, or it's your run with the others, and then who moves on, moves on.
So not so much in the ideas that you might have and what people can do with them, but more so in getting positions and grants.
Yeah, I think that's where the competitiveness really is. And if you focus on that, I don't know, if I would focus on that, I would never move on. I would just be too scared of everything that can happen. And I think it's much more rewarding just to work together and
find a community.
Yeah, but realize from the beginning that everybody has their own path, and they don't have to be linear, and it's going to be fine. And yes, sometimes you have to change your mind or you have to give up, but at least you had fun while doing it.
Yes, I think this is really the most important part. If you don't have fun, it is torture. You really have to like what you're doing. Otherwise, it is impossible to do research, because there are a lot of downs, right? So okay, so you had this very fun and enjoyable story, but you're not always that lucky, right? So that problem always, most of the time, stays there. You can't really touch that back. So yeah, there's a lot of frustration. There are a lot of downs, sometimes ups, but it is the progress. You have to like it, otherwise impossible to pursue.
But even in that nice story, like when we moved on, at some point we had this, what we thought being an extremely nice result. And we had almost finished writing the paper. We were checking the paper, in fact. And I still remember it. So we were in the office at the Newton Institute in Cambridge. And at some point, I don't remember which one of us said, okay, but here we are using this hypothesis. Are we sure that this is reasonable? I think 10 minutes later, we had a counterexample.
Oh, no.
And it destroyed completely the proof, completely. The result went from being fantastic to being just wrong because of that. And then it took a few days, and then we realized that there was a way to just work around it. And then we found a new proof. The result didn't change. The proof did change, and in the end it worked. But that day we thought we've lost months of work. Months, yeah. Really. This was like, I don't remember, but 9-10 months of work. And I mean, if you give up, then you have given up, you have lost that months of work. But sometimes if you reason a bit about it, so if you take a step further away from those emotions, and the day after or the week after when you are fresher, you say, okay, but let's look at it again. Is there anything we can do? Then you find out that more often than not, you can fix it, or you can change it in such a way that is still meaningful and makes sense, and you learn a lot from it.
That's true.
Did you have similar weird or fun or sad setbacks that you may or may not have come back from?
Right. So actually, we also had a paper with many collaborators. We had one result wrong, so the referee noticed that, so fix it and then send it back. We couldn't fix it. We had to remove the result because, well, it was not fixable by that time because we didn't have the machinery, and we had to remove the result. But then the journal didn't. I don't want to lie. Either the journal didn't find it good enough to publish, or we decided to send it to another journal, but we definitely changed the journal after removing that result. So yeah, it happens. But then later on, the result was correct. We just didn't have the proof. So later on, with the right machinery, it was proven somewhere else. Some other people proved. It happens.
I mean, ask any PhD students when they have finished draft. There is always some small detail that comes back and it takes weeks to fix it.
That's true. I mean, still my PhD thesis, I think it has still many mistakes, but fortunately nothing important.
So what I experienced as a student, and I was wondering if you experienced this too, is that if I'm going home and I've worked on a problem and I haven't solved it yet, that it stays in the back of my mind. Does this happen for you too? And how do you deal with this?
Always. Yeah, it happens always. And sometimes you try to let it go. If it works. And if it doesn't work, you just sit down and continue working. Right. So actually, when we were talking about this time management, I also wanted to ask you, do you ever manage to work from 9 to 5? Because I always work in the evenings to compensate the work that I could not finish during the day. Is that the case for all of you?
So I was lucky because I had this break in industry for 2 years. And there they taught me how to do that, basically. They forced me not to work in the evenings and weekends and during the holidays. So that's what I learned. I cannot say I'm doing it always. Like when I have lots of teaching, very often I have to shift something to evenings. When kids are sick and I'm at home with them, sometimes I take holidays. Sometimes I have deadlines, so then I work that in the evening. So I take sometimes in the weekends or whenever I can find it. But as a rule of thumb, I do not work in the weekends and I do not work in the evenings unless it's really necessary. Which means that I have to give up a lot of things, delegate and deprioritize, or just say no to a lot of things. And this was the hardest thing to do for myself. It's not 9 to 5. It's, I think, a bit more than that. And it's definitely not 9 to 5 in the sense of time. Depending on what is going on during the day, I really take advantage of the flexibility. So if I don't know, if kids have to go to sport or if they have to go to the doctor, then I don't work those 2 hours. Maybe after dinner, if I have the energy, or the day after, when I have the energy, I take back that time and do something that is much lower energy, for example.
Yeah, that is definitely my life. So yes, actually, since I started PhD, I kept working in the evenings. But maybe it is more healthy if you can separate these two things. So it is not the optimal thing to do. But well, right now I have to, because I have a child, and as you described, sometimes he is sick and I have to compensate what I'm missing during the day in the evening. But then I worry that the students think that I work like 24 hours, because sometimes I post things on Brightspace at night and then, or send emails. I'm like, oh, maybe I should wait. Because one student once told me that I don't want to become a researcher because you work a lot. You send emails after working hours. So I was a bad example for her, for example.
I remember this too. At some point, I had to turn my phone off because I kept getting emails at night for my for my courses. I'm not sure if it was you, so no worries. But yeah, I mean, this way of working might not suit everybody, and for some people, it might seem like this is what you have to do. But
I think it's a cultural problem, because I think it's still the norm that people work evening and weekends. We had a very fun story. Few years ago, we had this meeting with 2 very established researchers, got lots of grants. They were coming to talk about work-life balance. And 2 hours of talks about work-life balance and how it's important to separate. And then we say, how you manage to do so much, how we work evenings and weekends. And I say, come on, this is exactly what he told us not to do. But I think the hardest thing is that you need to understand you cannot do everything. You need sometimes to make choices of giving something up or freezing it for weeks, months, even years sometimes, and just accept the fact that time is finite and you need priorities. I think a big help in start doing that is indeed having kids, because they give structure to your life no matter what. And so they are the way that forces you by priority to say, so what is important now? And the focus is on them. And so you need to do the best you can do in the time that living with them allows, which is 9 to 5 when they are at school effectively, not weekends, not evenings. And even if you can work at evenings, at least for me, I don't know if it's age or kids or both, but I'm just exhausted in the evening now. So very rarely I can do that. And the other thing, some years ago I received an email from Petra Rudolph, and their email signature was, I chose to work flexible times, you don't have to respond to my emails outside yours. And I stolen that. So in my signature, you see that, and I got lots of reaction of that signature, of people saying, oh, thanks for that, because otherwise I would have felt pressure to respond immediately. And I think that's already could be a signal to tell our students and people around us, yes, I'm sending this email at night or at 11. Might be I cannot sleep. I need to procrastinate in some way, and this is one of those things that is annoying me right now not to sleep, and so I want to send it out. Might be that I couldn't work today, so I spent 2 or 3 hours this evening to catch back on the important things. Whatever it is, it's not that I'm working all the time. It's that this is the time I could find for this, and I decided to do it. So you don't have to. And many people, I think, now are trying to move to this way of working, understanding the compromise. And yes, we will do less, probably. My impression is that we will do more because we are less tired. At least I notice for myself that if I take holidays for real, which I started to do very late, after the holidays, I actually am happy to come back to work and do something. While before, if the holidays were a melting of work and holidays, you come back from the holidays and you are as drained or even more drained than before the holidays. And you never had that refreshing break. And besides all of this, usually your best ideas are not at working time, like pub times, getting a coffee, chatting in the corridor, having a shower, cooking, washing dishes, going for a run, sometimes just sleeping.
Oh yes, I've dreamed solutions, as I've probably said earlier.
Yeah, that also happened to me, yes.
So I don't know how that sounds to you, but that's at least the way I have been coping with that.
No, that's actually, I saw your automatic reply during Christmas. I really love that. So you were like, I'm completely disconnected from work, so I will not reply to you, something in this range, right? So I really like that. I should also make that automatic reply when I can really truly have holidays. Yes, I
You
really
still
liked
see
it.
these emails though, I'm sure.
Which ones?
The ones that you get, although you might not reply, you have this automatic reply set up, but you still receive them or not? Have you
No,
shut
I don't
everything
check
off?
them. So I have a filter, so there are a few people that I would notice. Like if I had something about organizing a podcast, I would have a filter with the people there. I have my PhD student on the filter.
Collaborators.
Yes,
I'm
collaborators.
joking, but then who is left?
If there are people that I'm working actively, then I would have the email, but they would know that I would not reply. So it's very, very rare. Like I think this holidays we had something about the podcast, and I was replying about that, right?
You were. That's why I was bringing this up. Yes.
So I have a filter where there are about 10, 15 rules, and it's now been there for a few years, so I don't remember them all. Like the ones I edit is master student and PhD students, but I do not actively read the email. So every now and then I check if anything in the folder of the filters has arrived, and when I have time, I check what's inside. But otherwise, it stays there and it's unseen. And then when I go back, I have hundreds. And then the fun thing is that somebody writes you with a problem, and then they write you something else. And then maybe I'll reply to you, I'll send you an email later. And then, oh, don't worry, we solved it. So you get 100 emails, but then you have 15 that are a problem, intermediate step, a solution of the problem. You have to do nothing about that. What I've learned from this is that I'm not really necessary for many things, so they can survive without me. And it's also something that helped me to start delegating more.
As a student, I do remember often sending this one question that was bothering me to my to my supervisor, and then having formulated this question, oh, shoot, I have the idea actually. Let me send another email saying that it's actually okay. So, yeah. How is your work-life balance, Hildeberto? Or?
Right. Indeed, I agree that having kids really puts into perspective what is important and what is not. So before I used to work quite a lot. I mean, I would not have any limits, to be honest. And it was just because, I mean, there are so many things to do. Sometimes you think, but this I can do better, and this I can do better. So there is always time to do things, right? Better. And then, once you have less time, you have to decide what you can do efficiently in that little time. So, and also this job it cannot be a 9-to-5 job, right? You cannot disconnect from thinking about your problem. So that's a good thing, but that also leads you to always be working, essentially, right? Because you somehow are always thinking about it. So, but yeah, I mean, indeed, you don't have to be sitting to do your job all the time. So that's the advantage of it. And you juggle with it, and you get the best out of it together with your circumstances. Yeah. So, but now I don't work evenings most of the times, except when teaching, because this is very pressing, right? So when you're teaching, some things are needed for the next day or something like this, then you have to do it. But it's not as demanding as doing research, right? For research, I think you really need to be fresh. And when you are preparing teaching and it's your third time, maybe you can get by doing it tired. It will not be perfect, but okay, that's all right. And yeah, weekends are kind of off the table, of course. But it's healthy. I think I found it healthy. I think we should do it without the need of external pressure. But I think it's also engraved in the scientific culture that you must work very many hours, because the more hours you work, the more you produce. And for some people, it is the case. It's not for everybody. Yeah. So it's difficult to balance indeed. But
can I change completely topic? One of the first questions we had that we have not yet asked was, do you actually talk about your research with family and friends, non-mathematician friends, I mean? And if you do that, how do you talk about it?
I think I did it more often when I was doing my PhD, because they were really interested in, like, okay, you're doing PhD in mathematics, so what do you do? I try to explain. I try to even, I try to explain my PhD problem. But then in time, I saw that people were like not really interested in what you're doing, because it was really too complicated to them. So even if you try to simplify everything. And then in time, I changed my perspective, or I changed my answer a little bit. I immediately tell them that what I do has application in cryptography. And, this security on the internet, if you go to HTTPS, so this means that you can look at the security channels there, and then there's something called RAS and blah, blah. So what I do is related to this kind of security, or the chips that you are using in the bank cards. And so I'm really not telling them anymore about my research. I'm really telling them what it could be useful. I'm not saying it is useful, but it could be. It has a potential. Actually, they also stopped asking. I should also say that when I started PhD, they asked, but nowadays no one is asking what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, for me it's similar. I mean, but of course the topic I do research in is much more approachable from an applied perspective. So indeed, I talk about the applicability or what you could potentially do with the mathematics we do, but not precisely about the mathematics, because indeed I think you want the conversation to be interesting, right? And so for example, I'm completely oblivious of certain music of the 1600s. So if I don't know the language, I will not appreciate this conversation, right? So I think to talk about mathematics, you don't have to be an expert of mathematics, of course, but if you want to talk about research, there should be some language that the other person can can find meaningful. And if not, then it's not that you reduce it, you just talk about things that they can relate, right? And so it's about the applications, as Pinar says, or the potential applications about it, because that people can realize. But I think it's much more common that people stop asking. Also, I mean, of course, this is not a matter of everybody, but your circle stops growing at a certain level, or not with the same rate as when you were young. So the amount of people that could ask about it, maybe they have already asked a few times. So you don't find, or at least I don't find this question that often anymore. No.
And have you found yourself having to explain what it means to do research? If I think of my experience, many people ask you what you do, and then you say, okay, I'm a professor or lecturer at the university, and they say, oh, so you teach. You say, yeah, that's part of my job. So what else do you do? What problems are you solving in the world? And I say, well, I'm not really solving any problem in the world per se. Did you ever have this experience?
And that's much more common, indeed. Yes, when I've experienced it a lot with my neighbors, for example. That's of course the first or one of the first questions. What do you do? What you're doing here? I work at the university. Then you teach. Yes. But we also do other things. Yes, this is definitely much more common. Yeah, I don't think doing research is such a widespread profession anyway. So that's why people are curious, right? What we do, yes.
You, of course, have children that are still very young, but you have children that are a bit older now. What do they think you are doing in your job? How do you describe it to them?
That's a very good question. I don't know what they think I'm doing in my job. They know that I teach, that I have students, that sometimes I have to be there for exams. They know that I am doing something new, and sometimes I have to leave to go and talk about it at some conferences. They were at Northern Zone when I was giving the talk there, so they've seen that they give presentation in that sense. I'm going to go back home and ask them this evening.
Or then you have to tell us next episode of the podcast what they think.
Deal. Next episode I will tell you what they think.
I will ask that question again. One other question that I would really like to ask you is about this self-critical voice that some people experience. I mean, a lot of peers have experienced this before you start writing on your thesis or on a paper, because it might not be completely correct at first, of completely to the standard that you would like to have. How do you deal with this voice? How do you start writing? Hildeberto, would you like to reply?
Right. I think this is a very good question because of course, you have to learn how to write, but you should not expect that the very first time you write something, it will be, I don't know, the final product. This is not the way how one should approach it. Writing, even your first draft compared to the final one, will be completely different. And most of the times it will be. So because probably the way you started writing it was not as clear, and so it's also an evolving process. So my recommendation, or what I try to tell my students, is just write. Don't worry about whether it is completely correct or completely clear. Just write whatever progress you have, whatever doubts you think are important, or questions that you think we should address. But most importantly, things that you have understood and things, but just write them. Don't worry about the order, don't worry about the flow, nothing like that. Then once there is enough information that we believe it can form a product, and I don't know, let's call it a thesis, then we go through it, we see what is the contents, we put a logical flow on it, and then we see, this requires some further explanation, maybe connect better sections. Then you put together the main parts of your text and you connect them in a logical way, and it is a process that doesn't and should not be done perfect the first time. I don't think one should have that in mind. Actually, I think it's the opposite, that it works against the process of writing, because then you block yourself. You don't know what to write. And so I think we should just write, and then things will come together.
I remember from my PhD that when I was getting my feedback from my supervisor, it was all colorful, lots of red, lots of blue. And he had this systematic way of giving feedback. You know, the colors meant something. I don't remember some right now, but there was red, there was blue, there was purple, all kinds of colors. So students, if you get this kind of colorful feedback, don't get overwhelmed. It is in the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still remember the very first paper I got back from my supervisor. I wanted to quit because it was so full of, but no, I mean, it's just somebody more experienced than you helping you learn something you don't know yet how to do, right? And because communicating your ideas is not something that everybody gets naturally. We should also keep in mind the reader, and we don't always do that, right? So I think indeed, don't be afraid, of course, or corrections don't mean that you're wrong. It just means that it can be better, right? I think.
It is a process, right? Everything. I mean, writing, you're learning how to write, you're learning how to do research, you're learning how to be precise, you're learning how to be patient. So it is in the process forever. So it's not only during your master or PhD, it is still what's happening to us right now, even. So it is all normal, whatever you feel right now.
Do you never think when you read someone's first draft, the student's first draft, oh my gosh, they don't understand this at all. They're so dumb. I mean,
No.
Students worry about this. I do, at least.
No, you don't say dumb, of course not. But you say that, okay, this student lacks some knowledge, right? So you see it there. So you can clearly understand if the student understood what they are writing there, right? So these are the things that you can understand, but you always they're all capable students. This is just that they don't maybe have the correct knowledge for the topic. This is what you think. At least this is my perspective.
I would add yet to your sentence, right? So yes, this you read it, you say, okay, this student didn't understand this part, and then you have comments and try to help them understand. That's what you need. Like your role as supervisor there is, I need to figure out what they didn't understand or what they're struggling with so that I can help them and struggle and understand it. So that's what I'm really looking for. And when they send us the first draft, but even with my first draft, the first draft is your way to wrapping down your thoughts. So it will be full of holes, full of new questions coming because you misunderstood something. So dumping down the ideas is what helps you figure out what you're understanding or not. And once that is ready, after many iterations and rewritings, actually complete rewritings very often, then you see you have a completely different picture in your mind, which probably informs a new version again. But then you decide, okay, who is my target audience? And then you have to rewrite it again so that it targets that audience, right? So you need to start with the understanding that your first draft is just there to be rewritten. And the other difficult thing, because it's a judgment, is asking for the feedback. So sending it out to the person that you know will be honest with you, which usually is some of your peer, and say, please, write down what you think, what you don't understand, and everything. That's the thing that comes back all in colors, usually. But it's true, when you write a grant application, you send the first draft to your friends, the ones that you know will read it and will be critical, and you will rewrite it. Just rewrite it. You know you're going to throw it away. But the understanding you get from what they didn't understand or they didn't like is what will make that grant good. Then, okay, you will get it or not, like a paper will be published or not, with many other factors, including luck, including the referees. But at least you've done your best, and you could done your best because you had this external input that were honest, and you shouldn't take it personally. That's the hardest part. It's not a problem. If you start having fear of getting feedback, that's what's the point of getting feedback. And it's hard. I understand it's hard. It's hard also for me, for everybody, that especially the first times when you see you have to do everything again. But that's the most valuable part of getting feedback.
Right. I mean, I guess one piece of advice for the students would be don't really pretend that you understand something. Be honest with your supervisor and go to him or her, say that I didn't understand this part. Let's study this part again, and that just makes the progress more efficient for both sides. So just be honest and be more comfortable, and we are there to help you, not to judge you.
Yeah, and in a way, what you said, being afraid of feedback, this is also a way of learning, I guess, how to take feedback and how to form it into something productive for young people. This can be quite overwhelming when a supervisor that you look up to says, no, this is not what I meant, this is not good. But it's not the end of the world at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, you will be subject to this experience anyway. Like when I write a paper and I send it out for feedback, I expect I will have to change things. And when I write a grant especially, I will expect to rewrite it a few times before it's settled on something that I am satisfied with and that I don't get too much critical feedback against. So it's not going to stop that process. And if you are defensive from the beginning, you will never learn from it.
Although I would love to continue this discussion, time-wise, we're almost to the end. So I want to thank you for all your insights, useful insights, also to the students, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you for listening also to the podcast. Please let us know what you thought of it if you have any ideas. And until next time.
And if you like the episode, don't forget to share it with your friend on your social channels.